Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for waiting patiently as we allow some folks to come into the room, and we'll get started shortly. All right. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you so much for making time. It's a Monday. It is a Monday after a holiday. So I appreciate everyone just spending their evening with me. I am here to do two things, one of which is to focus on something I call right relationship. And some of you have heard of this concept of being in right relationship. And I have taken the past year since I relocated from Texas A&M and living in College Station and relocating to University of Virginia, Charlottesville area, to really contemplate being in right relationship with people I care about, with the wonderful people that I've developed relationships with over the past 10, 11 years doing this work around African-American heritage conservation and historic preservation and planning, and being in right relationship with our earth, with our environment, and being in right relationship with people that we engage in research with or that we collaborate with. And so the purpose of this evening is not just to reintroduce myself and my work and talk about ways that you can get involved, but to really have us all contemplate what it is to be in right relationship with the communities in which we are doing historic preservation work, in which we're doing any type of work. So to that end, I want to welcome my two guests. I'm going to mute for one moment the video, just one moment. So the special guests that I have with us this evening, I've known for the past 5-6 years, met one of them at a Real Places conference, and she actually showed up to one of the presentations that was made at a Real Places conference in Austin. And it seems that she might have taken my presentation seriously because ever since we've been in communication and we've been really focused on building relationship. And so I'm excited to share what Glenda and Dave Tucy are doing in Gonzales County, Texas. So let me give you an overview of the evening first. So for the first hour, we're going to be very focused on listening and engaging around the work that's been going on in African American heritage conservation and preservation in Gonzales County, Texas. And then we'll have a brief discussion going into a little bit of an intermission as we make a transition to talking about my transition to UVA and the Texas Freedom Colonies Project. And then we'll move into staying involved and sharing our community news, because everyone here is doing really important, exciting work. And so we should all be able to, I think, share that as well. So with that, I want to make sure we all are on the same page around the goals for the evening. I want us to learn strategies for shifting local power and changing organizational representation and preservation groups. And that's what we're going to learn. We're going to learn a little bit about what that process is like. We're going to gain a greater awareness of how race, power, and positionality impact public history, preservation, and research. We're going to hear about the expanded scope of my own research, which includes Texas Freedom Colonies Project. And then we're going to discuss ways that everyone can get involved and keep this movement we're all part of going. So again, our program is entitled Work in Progress, Local Preservation and Race in Gonzales County, Texas. And I just want to introduce these really exciting people to you. One of which is Mr. David Tucy. And Mr. David Tucy is born in Rockport, Texas, and attended segregated Edwards schools 1958 to 1965 in Gonzales, Texas. And he attended integrated schools 1966 to 1970. 1971, he joined the U.S. Army, where he served 23 years and retired as a master sergeant. He's been married 41 years to Ruby and has 5 children and 9 grandchildren. He has been involved with or worked for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice and Healthcare Food Service programs. He's the first African-American to serve in the Gonzales Independent School District School Board, the Gonzales Economic Development Board, the Mayor's Historical Diversity Committee, and the Gonzales Historical Museum Committee. Since 2016, he's been president of the Edwards Association, a nonprofit organization dedicated to restoration and preservation of the old Edwards High School and making the history of that high school known. He's currently serving as the Veterans County Service Officer for Gonzales County, where he assists veterans and their families with filing benefit claims. Glenda Gordon is president of Preservation Gonzales, Preservation Officer for Gonzales County Certified Local Government, Preservation Committee Chair, Thomas Shelton Chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution, Gonzales Jail Museum Restoration Team Project Manager, Gonzales Crystal Theater Restoration Team and Young Program Volunteer. She has a bachelor's in MED from Stephen F. Austin University. She's been a school counselor, educational diagnostician of special education, English, public speaking, and special education teacher, and has retired from public education, been retired since 2001, and moved to Gonzales to begin volunteering in preservation activities. And I'm excited about the far-reaching, complex conversation that we're going to have today around preservation and race and public history. And with that, I'm going to stop share so that we can see our wonderful participants. So Glenda, let me make sure you have your video on. Glenda and Mr. Tucy. All right, and unmute. And when you begin speaking, we'll have you featured at the beginning. We'll have you featured for everyone to hear from you as soon as you unmute. Awesome. Glenda, Mr. Tucy, thank you so much for being with us this evening. I'm excited to have you.
My honor.
Excellent. And are you live and direct from Gonzales, Texas?
Yes, we are.
All right. Awesome. So the questions that we talked about, what we were going to talk about, and the big piece here is around not just how you two came together, but what it was like. First of all, each of you, what was your reality growing up in Gonzales County, Texas, which is in Central Texas? So if you don't mind, I'd like to begin with Mr. Tucy. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience of growing up in Gonzales, Texas?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Absolutely. And thank you so much. So when I grew up in Gonzales, as my bio said, I was born in Rockport, Texas, moved to Gonzales, Texas at the age of 3 years old. I started school at the age of 6 at the Edwards Elementary School, which was all segregated Black school here in Gonzales. I grew up in the Edwards Apartments, which had the same name, and was right across the street from the Edwards High School. So we were able to walk right across the street to school. So I went there from the 1st to the 3rd grade. From the 4th to the 5th grade, the 4th to the 6th grade, I went to the Riverside Elementary School, which was, I would say, approximately 3 to 4 miles from the Edwards High School. And that was the elementary school for the Black kids at that time. So we were bused from Edwards from the 1st to the 3rd grade to Riverside Elementary School from the 4th to the 6th grade. After that, then we came back to Edwards for junior high school, which at that time I was in the 7th grade, and that was in 1965, which was when the old school was closed down. And the last graduating class from Edwards High was in 1965. So it was a time, at that time, we were segregated and we were to ourselves pretty much. So there wasn't much strife because we kind of stayed on our side of town, so to speak. And when you did venture into the other side of town, you know, you were kind of careful. Your parents had to direct you as to how to act, what to say, what not to say, if you went downtown or something like that. So in downtown Gonzales, there was also a street called Colored Street at the time. And there were numerous Black businesses on that street. They've all been, they're all gone now, but at that time there were barbershops and funeral homes and cafes and food parlors and whatnot. So it was an exciting time, and the farmers would come into town. I can remember seeing them. They would come into town on Saturdays, and everybody would accumulate down on Color Street and have a good time.
Mm.
But once again, you know, you kind of stayed in your lane. So, you know, the segregation atmosphere was very heavy during the time that I grew up.
Mhm.
And after which went to integration in 1966, where I started the 8th grade. And then I graduated in 1970. And that was at the integrated Gonzales High School.
Mm.
That process was kind of touch and go sometimes, the integration process. I can remember that there were numerous, numerous fights among the races on the early onset. And I can remember the principal having to call us into the auditorium practically every day during that time to try to calm things down and to talk to the students and, you know, finally let us know that we all are going to have to work this out.
Mm.
And things changed. Graduated in 1970 and played sports there and made a lot of good friends, Black and white, Hispanic, of all the races here in Gonzales. And, you know, at some point we came together, especially as high school students. There may have been a lot of uncertainty among the adults, I would say, but the students, we did have a relationship. Some of us, not all, but some of us.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yes, ma'am. Mhm.
So what could you say, Glenda, about your experience growing up, or that any time that you've lived in Gonzales? What has your experience been around what you remember about race relations? Anything significant compared to what Mr. Tucy just shared?
I moved to Gonzales in 1970s,
Mhm.
coming into work in special education as we began special education in public schools. So it was called child finding. We were bringing children in from all over the county who had not been given a really education, public education, in the same sense that we are now. I grew up in Marshall, Texas. Marshall was clearly defined racially, divided racially. I mean, we had East Texas Baptist College, and we had Wiley College, and Bishop College.
Mhm.
So it was a very unique experience growing up, but I never really noticed anything. I mean, you know, it was as a child and as a graduate in 1965 from high school, the difference between 65 and 70 in public schools, I think, was significant. I was graduating from college in 1970 and moved to West Texas to teach in Crane, Texas. So those were different times. My sister graduated 10 years later than I did in Marshall, Texas, and those were very, very difficult times with the races and integrated school. I experienced that as a counselor in Fort Bend area, the Lamar Consolidated, because we opened a school in what we call a bedroom community. And right next to that school was a large population of Black students who were living in projects. So, and they were attending school there. And I saw the real difficulties that young people have when they are blended for the first time and not really understanding the different races and the different social expectations.
So
in
what
those.
made both of you want to get involved with historic preservation and public history? And Glenda, I'm going to invite you to share now, and feel free to prompt me to share any pictures that you want about your work.
Well, I was invited by the former chair of the Gonzales County Historical Commission. And be careful what you say you will do when you're in a party involving wine. I said, well, that's not fun. And that's been maybe 15 years ago. So I am an English major. History is of interest to me, but not to the extent that that I am involved in it now. But I'm also interested in systems and organizing and the research involved in it sometimes. So you know, I have a wide interest in, but I'm more about the relationships that we have, that we build when we are investigating events and investigating people's responses, the oral histories, the types of things that we do. It's all about learning about each other. So to me, it is, it's been very rewarding to me personally to be involved with the Edwards School and the Edwards Association and all of the wonderful people that I have met and interacted with as a result of looking up and saying, well, you know, this facility really needs to be on the National Register. We really need to get that.
So I'm going to put a picture up here to kind of prompt or ask you to talk a little bit about why we're even talking about Gonzales. You do amazing work, both of you, and it's very interesting, but I think it's important to kind of contextualize that work in terms of where it happens. So I've shared a picture here, and I wonder if either of you could say anything about it when we talk about doing historic preservation work in Gonzales.
I would like to just say that Gonzales claimed to fame in Texas history and especially in Gonzales history. It was the location of the first battle of the Texas Revolution. And so the cannon, the Come and Take It cannon and the Come and Take It flag has universal recognition. And the battle site is just a few miles from the heart of downtown Gonzales. My observation about Gonzales when I moved here in the 70s was that all history that was told was about the 1835, the 1836 time periods. And there was so much more history here to share. And I think that's where David and I actually formed a partnership in telling a different history and a different point of view. It's like a kaleidoscope. You turn the kaleidoscope 1 degree to the right, you get a totally different point of view, a totally different picture there. And that's what I enjoy really about the research and the telling of different histories. I learn something every time.
So let's get into, in the interest of time, I want everyone to learn about sort of your work to not just diversify the history, but to really change the way public history is done. And if you can, I want to make sure you have opportunity to answer as well. But Mr. Tucy, can you talk about how you came to collaborate with Glenda?
Yes, ma'am. So as I became the president of the Edwards Association in 2016, I began to develop a deep passion for the restoration and preservation of our old school. And also during that time, there were events going on around the United States. Charlottesville was one. And then more recently after that, the George Floyd incident. And then around about 2016, I would say, there was an announcement at our church, at the Providence Baptist Church, that there was going to be a young man to go downtown to speak to the mayor and have a meeting with the mayor, and an announcement asked if anybody wanted to join him. And so I thought about it, and I went down to join him. And so he and I had a meeting with the mayor and the city manager, the chief of police, and several other individuals there. And it was really about the Confederate statue that's on the Confederate Square in Gonzales. And we had a meeting about that, and we gave our own different views and opinions and whatnot. And then at that time, the mayor had committed to form a committee to address those concerns. And this was in about, I think about 2016. So about 4 years later is when we readdressed, when she readdressed it. So I went to a city council meeting during that time, and I spoke to the city council. And I wanted to make it clear that I wasn't there to advocate the removal of the statue like they were doing across the country. And you remember the time frame, especially around Charlottesville and whatnot. And so I wasn't there to really advocate for the removal of the statue, but I was there to advocate for inclusion of African-American history down on the square as well, since it was our town. And it was always addressed as our town, but that it just portrayed one side of history, in my opinion. And I explained to them that if I was to take my granddaughter down to the Confederate Square and try to explain to her some of the history that surrounded the square and the statue, that I could only tell her one side of the history. And there was nothing there to show any of the accomplishments of the Black citizens, of Black teachers after the Civil War. So at that meeting, that's when, Glenda, you were there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we really got to know one another. And the mayor, she established a committee, and Glenda and I was on that committee to see what we could do about diversifying the square, changing the name. And at that time, I requested a name change of the Confederate Square, and I suggested Independence Square, which would be relevant for everybody, really. And so that's how Glenda and I came to work together. And during the meetings that we had, we were able to accomplish what we set out to do by getting the name of the square rechanged from Confederate Square to Independence Square, and also the installment of 4 interpretive panels right on the same square where the Confederate statue is, that talk about the accomplishments of African Americans in Gonzales and Gonzales County after the Civil War. So, and I just thought it was important that we would have some type of inclusion in our town and physical, perpetual representation of the accomplishments of African Americans here in Gonzales. And so we started working together, and we've been working together ever since. And I'm loving every moment of it. this interpretive panel here, this depicts the African-American journey, 1863 to 1965, and it shows the last graduating class from the old Edwards High School in 1965. It also shows the Edwards campus and the inside of the old Edwards Gymnasium. This slide shows the inside of the old gymnasium and the lamella ceiling that we're very proud of here in Gonzales. It's one of a kind here in Gonzales, and it was invented during the World War II era when there was a shortage of iron, and that was invented to the roof to sustain itself without the use of iron.
Yes, thank you so much for pointing that out, because it's really how could I say, kind of a heart-stopping experience when I came in to do a workshop, and afterwards we had the opportunity to tour the school, and you just look up and you go, whoa. It's like Sistine Chapel in wood. It's just gorgeous. It's really, really quite beautiful. So can you, Glenda, speaking of the workshop, that was incredible work done at the square and cooperation and collaboration. You want to talk about the other collaboration, which you invited me to be a part of?
In 2018, before we were able to dedicate the statues, the panels, I invited a regional group from the certified local governments and also the county historical commissions. And we co-sponsored that with Edwards, served as host for that. And we invited, like I said, a regional workshop, and we had representatives from the National Register in Austin. The THC representative was there, as well as the certified local government director and attendees from the various portions of the State Historical Commission. But that was a very interesting meeting, I think. I think the people who came to see what we were doing really took away a little bit more motivation than we have had. You know, we have a small group of history preservationists in every county. And we gave a different approach, a different view of those who are interested in it, besides those Anglo faces, those white and older faces. So I think we energized. I think the program energized many, and they have been following what we are doing and how it's working, and that makes us feel really good that we're helping shed some different points of view on what we do with preservation.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to share some pictures, and then we can all talk about what we see in the pictures. And these are pictures of the workshop, the purpose of which was to do a few things. As Glenda mentioned, there were some representatives from Texas Historical Commission, particularly the CLG program, which was in charge of organizing most of the event. And then I was brought in to do a workshop on how to not only invite African Americans to get involved in surveying and doing outreach, but to share ways that using these projects, you can begin to diversify or change the face of the actual leadership in the community, which is something that Glenda decided was something she was interested in. She said, oh, we could talk about the surveying, but then you can kind of we can kind of do it in a Black church, and then we can walk to the Black school. And I said, okay, I'll do this.
I'll be okay.
I was like, this sounds good. In Gonzales, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to show a few pictures from the workshop, the purpose of which was to explain what a freedom colony is, talk about things to consider if you're leading an effort to document or identify freedom colonies and buildings and structures in freedom colonies, and then strategies and thinking through issues of implicit bias, differences around understanding what's historically significant. All of those kind of things were what we discussed. So I'm going to show some of the exercises and a few pictures from the actual event or the workshops in 1 second here. Thanks for your patience with our tech here. So this is, that was the event. We toured, these are some of our tour pictures and you see the panels, but our actual event, sorry about this. Let me go back here. Let's start at the beginning. There we go. So this workshop was where we not only toured and had lots of individuals from different counties and cities. We had individuals from City Landmark Commission, Austin City Landmark Commission. We had folks from, at least 4 or 5 other counties. So it wasn't just a Gonzales event, it was a regional event. And the reason why I wanted to work with the CLG is to kind of do a pilot for something that I think that we should be doing on a broader scale, which is dealing with this challenge around representation in county historical commissions. Do the members of the Preservation Commission represent the general ethnic diversity of the community? These are answers from members of certified local governments. So it's not an outside person coming in and critiquing them, right? These are the number of people who responded, the number of certified local governments at that time, which have increased since, but at that time was 74. So not only did they have a high response rate, but they also were saying in a real big way that they were kind of concerned that maybe we don't look like our communities. So they had a realization of that. And so how could they more proactively, how could they work to change that was the question. So part of it was a little education around this issue of implicit bias, which Glenda already expressed, which is in Gonzales, we're really focused on the canon. We're really focused on Texian or Republic of Texas history when we have this broader history of place that we're not engaging. And we're not engaging difficult issues like the relationship between the early Republic of Texas and Mexico and slavery, which is hidden beneath a lot of the history of Gonzales and a lot of the early history of Texas. So we did a number of what I thought were kind of fun exercises where we asked people to draw where they call home. What is the place that reminds them of their childhood? What is part of their core story? What place tells the story of their lives that exists? And then they compared that. So people from different walks of life had different perspectives on what it was like to grow up in Gonzales, what their most important place to live was in Gonzales. And then when we talked about representation, we talked about ways to change the way these communities' leadership looks. So it was everything from budget allocation to representation on boards across gender, income, age, all types of factors. And then there were these results when people did a self-assessment of their individual communities and what kind of job they were doing. Responses like, I tried, but they wouldn't come. They don't seem to care about their heritage. Why can't we get those people involved in what we are doing? And very few talked about ways to collaborate or support existing preservation projects. Their solutions were often, well, can you come out here and talk to them for me, Dr. Roberts? And that really amplified for me the deeper need to do this work around bias and a sense that preservation isn't happening unless it's happening in white-led organizations. So there was this grand misconception that was unearthed when they did their self-assessments and when we had more casual conversations afterwards. So these drawings are just example drawings of people who participated. And so, and there was a paper that I shared that it's publicly available about the results. But I think more importantly, it was an example of deeper work we need to do around representation and leadership in historic preservation, and also opening up the conversation on what it's like to collaborate. So I really want to learn from both Glenda and David. How did you build trust, and how did you overcome or confront? What did you have to overcome or confront in order to do this work together? Mr. Tucy, you had to step out and engage some people that maybe weren't always fun to engage. Glenda, you had exciting ideas, but you maybe didn't always get the response that you thought you were going to get. Let's talk about what that experience was like. Either one of you can start.
That's right. So as I think about after the meeting we had at the city council, of course, it was videoed and everything in the paper, and people were allowed to comment live. And it was so amazing that, since I grew up in Gonzales, I was gone for a while, but I still knew quite a few people in here. And I thought that I had a rapport with people, and that I may have been liked by people that I kind of found out maybe didn't like me after that meeting. Some of the responses that we got, so those were bumps for me, and it was kind of disturbing, disheartening to read some of the comments that people were saying about me because of what I was trying to get accomplished. And, there were times that I would say, oh, well, nobody really cares anyway, so maybe I should just leave this alone, or something like that. Right. But I could not do that because I felt a passion for what we were doing. And once Glenda and I got on board, and I could feel her passion, and she's Anglo and I'm African American, and we share the same passion for doing something, and I thought, well, this is definitely worthwhile, both sides of the aisle. And there were even, African Americans that weren't really on board with what we were doing, because the Confederate statue and the Confederate square in a lot of people's minds was just kind of invisible, having been in Gonzales for so long and never really, paid that much attention to it, or didn't really look into it that much. And then when it came to light, it's kind of say, oh, I didn't realize that, that the statue was a Confederate statue. But I had people to tell me that maybe I should move out of town if I didn't like. And these were some of my classmates that I went to school with, and that's when I thought, oh my goodness, I never knew that people felt that way about me or about this situation, especially. So those were bumps in the road for me, and then I began to think that it's all about attitude, the way you really look at it and how you perceive what's going on, and that a lot of people just haven't taken the time to study up on the history or something like that, but yeah. So it was kind of difficult for me at first, and I almost lost heart, but working with Glenda on the mayor's diversity
Mhm.
committee. And that's how we began to build trust in one another, just talking about the things and being honest and open-minded, not closed-minded, because that is something that's very important. We have to be open-minded when we talk about these types of diversity issues.
Mhm. So Glenda, can you speak to what we were talking about beforehand, which was your initial introduction of some of the projects that you thought would be of interest, and you're initially kind of sharing those and the reception, and both of you want to talk about that a little bit, about some of the preservation projects that you introduced, Glenda.
Yes, before I do, I would love to respond to what
Please.
David said, because I got a lot of advice as well from a variety of people in the community. They did not want the name of their square changed. And actually, their solution was that it was originally Jail Square. And so I had to do a deep dive back to the beginning of the founding of Gonzales and the maps and the early naming of the squares, and to say, well, really there was no jail ever there, but because the city had their offices in the top of the fire station, people may have been held in jail. It's just like, okay, well, so I did a deep dive into Gonzales history and to the naming of the squares, and there was never, it was kind of wayfinding. It's like you go down to the Confederate monument and you turn left, and this is where you find something, but it was never named officially.
Oh.
So we got through all of that. We presented all of that to the city council, and I know the city council really wanted to change that. And I know also those who work in the city and had during that time had to put Confederate Square on a map. That was like putting a target on Gonzales at that time with those who were tearing down monuments. So it all worked. I don't know why it worked, but we just, I just kept coming back with facts.
Yeah.
We could say, well, gentlemen, ladies, this is what we found out in response to that argument, and this kind of thing. So
I think your hard work and your dedication, it helped build the trust, because I could see that you committed
trying to find
out and to try to make changes.
Yeah. And we decided that we would do equal time. There was no interpretation there, period. So to do the monument was there and there was no interpretation. So I said, okay, 4 panels on the left side for the Confederacy. The contribution in Gonzales to the Confederacy was significant. And the monument was put there as a memorial to those who died in other places. So it was kind of, if it had been in a cemetery, it would have been okay, but it wasn't. It was 1910, and they put that in there as a memorial to the Confederate Anglos who died there or died elsewhere. So then we had 4 for the African American community, and that was difficult because I didn't know the history of either one. As far as, and what is important from Juneteenth, and that's kind of what we decided, that we would start with the emancipation and move forward. And so what institutions, what was there about Gonzales that was important and could track the history of the African American people in Gonzales? And we kind of looked around to see what we had, what listings we had. So we came up with the churches and their religion was incredibly important. And the schools, the churches and the schools. And then we focused in on that beginning of integration. And we looked at 3 or 4 of those teachers who left Edwards and bravely went into Gonzales High School and taught there those years. And that's where we got those panels and the history of that. So we made it personal. We made it home. This is the we made it personal.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
managed to cover the periods of time. And because all history, I've been told, is local.
It really is. That is true. That is true.
So I kept with that,
Mhm.
did my research for a year and a half, and had lots and lots of good photographs, or not a lot of them, but some wonderful vintage photographs. I'm so proud of the baptism at the Guadalupe River. I mean, it brings it right in, right in focus. So that's kind of how we got around it all. We just basically responded politely and kindly to negative encouragements.
You're so diplomatic.
But I did not get the same responses as David did. David's were personal, and I don't take much of anything personal.
So we do have another guest. I want to make sure we give her time before we open up for questions from the audience or from the people who are here with us. Elyze Davis is with us, and she's the future, right? So you've done all this incredible work, but I wonder if Elyze wanted to share a little bit about what made her want to start to get involved and how she's beginning to get involved with preservation efforts in Gonzales.
Hello, thank you. My name is Elyze Davis. I am a member of the Gonzales County Historical Commission, and thank you, Dr. Edwards, for allowing me this time, and Ms. Glenda Gordon for your support thus far. I really appreciate it. Just to talk a little bit about how I got involved in the commission and with the project. I am from Dallas, Texas, but my mother is from Mount Eaton community. She's on the call. She is,
Awesome.
And basically, she was moving towards trying to get an historical marker for the Mount Eaton community. Mount Eaton is in Welder, Texas. It's in Gonzales County. And, it's a feat. It's a lot of research. It's a lot of writing to submit those applications to the Gonzales County as well as the Texas Historical Commission. And I volunteered to help her. And so I started with my mother, and that discussion and those oral histories and her conversations with her classmates and her relatives and her friends and things like that. And that served as a springboard to, trying to find the deeds I needed, trying to find census records, and once again acknowledging Glenda Gordon, because she was so helpful in sending me news articles and things like that to kind of help me start off in the right direction as I did research about Mount Eaton community as a community that did, have those freed slaves right after slavery, figuring out how to get that land and then how to, expand that community. So that's where I started. And then, you have to write your narrative. And just as an aside, I'm in that process again with Ralph Bunche School. And so I'm diligently working on that. Mount Eaton community, Mount Eaton School, they moved to Welder, Texas. And there's an African-American school in Welder, Texas, Ralph Bunche school. And so I'm working to gather that information as well. And so did you want me to talk a little bit about Mount Eaton, like the history, or just kind of talk about how I got involved?
Yeah, I would love for you to kind of give us a brief history before we open up for discussion. Yeah, please share Mount Eaton.
And so Mount Eaton community is formerly Hicks's, Texas, and it was originally populated by freed slaves. And so I'll tell you a little bit about the people. So while there were many notable families who helped build the community in the late 1800s, Clara Baldridge was given 6 acres of land by her former slave. And Clara's son, Lee Pettit, was the biological son of the slave owner. And he purchased, I say purchased, an additional 60 acres through barter of a gray horse. And notably, the previous slave owner, Lee's father, did not take the horse with him when he left the area. So these particular individuals are my ancestors. And so I was able to start once again with my mother's oral history and then backtrack and find, all those deed records and things that allowed my family to go back and look at what we own and when we owned it. And so, oh, my mother's in my ear. Take a look to show my PowerPoint. Hold on. Okay, let me see.
So for those of you who want to line up for questions, please use the raise hand signal, okay? And then we'll start right after. We have about 2 minutes for you to present.
Kind of wrap. Okay.
Well, we obviously need to make more time for you to present more. So actually, let's do this. If you could, let's stop share. Actually, for now, if you don't mind. And when we come back from the intermission, I want to fully give you time to share your PowerPoint. Let's do that. I think that would be better. If you don't mind.
Oh, no, that's fine. Whatever you guys need, I'm here for you guys.
Yeah, I think we deserve to give this proper time. So what I want to do now is if you could unshare.
Oh, yes. Let's see.
And then any questions and comments about what we've discussed so far, I want to give people an opportunity to do that. And then we need to pay attention to the story of Mount Eaton.
See how many skills she has.
What is that? I don't know how to unshare.
Huh. There we go.
Okay.
Magic. All right. So we've got a few hands raised. If you could use the raise hand signal, that would be ideal. I see that Iris Grant has a question or comment. You can go ahead and share.
Hi, yes. I just wanted to let you know, it looks like James Kirkwood doesn't have maybe doesn't know how to use the raise hand.
Oh, I see him. I will make sure, but thank you.
Okay. Is there a website to go to get more information on the work that they've done in Gonzales County? Because I'm curious about some of the original settlers and their the people that they enslaved, who were some of my ancestors who did not stay in Gonzales County, but moved to other counties like Bexar County, Medina County, just down the road, but stayed in Texas.
So Glenda, would you and Mr. Tucy, do you think that you could share a contact, and you don't have to do it for everyone, but if you would like, you can do an individual message just to Iris, or whatever you'd like to do.
I would love to share with everyone if they have questions, because we do not have a website with this, but I'm building a digital library that will soon be moving into the jail museum.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can, if you will email me at gfgordon0@gmail.com, I'll be happy to respond to you, and then we can have a conversation. and see how we can help you. Right now, I have much information digitally, but I am not set up to distribute it as a website. So
Uh,
that
Mr. Kirkwood,
James on.
Yes, how you doing?
how are you?
All right. My name is Colonel James Kirkwood, U.S. Army retired, and I'm the administrator for the Terryville Community Cemetery Association. Um, in June 1865, when General Granger came to Galveston and announced that all the slaves were free, the slave owners in southern Gonzales County didn't know what to do with the now free slaves. So they gave them 5 acres of land that included the old burial ground, where the slaves were buried back since 1845. We have got access to the cemetery. We have been able to. Let me back up. When they gave them this 5 acres of land, this became what was known as the Terryville community. And Terryville community had a general store. They had a elementary school that went to the, a school went to the elementary grades, and it was part of a school district that had no white schools in it. That was a long. I can't remember the exact, but it's 3 particular communities, and they had a Baptist church. I have 16 of my ancestors buried in the Terryville Community Cemetery. We have been able to get the cemetery fenced in, a gate in the original position where the old gate was, and a sign over the gate that says Terryville Community Cemetery. We know of 117 names of 117 people that are buried there, but in our research, we were able to uncover 1,244 graves in the cemetery.
How did you uncover 1,244 graves?
Divining rod.
Interesting. Okay. And when you say we, who do you have supporting you in this work? That's a lot of work.
My great-grandfather, Ned Nobles, was born in Africa along with his wife, was brought to Jamestown, Virginia by boat. In 1859, 1860, they were sold to John D. DeBose, who had a store in Gonzales, Texas. And they walked from Jamestown, Virginia to Gonzales. My great-grandmother was 8 years old. 5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, Ned was able to buy 60 acres of land for $260. That's the equivalent to $5,588 in now money. And that land is still in the family. In fact, he bought 20 more acres. We have a total of 80 acres, 8 miles southwest of Gonzales.
Wow.
And there was an article written by the one of the news persons from Gonzales Inquirer. And if you go out on the web and say, just say slavery in Gonzales County, Texas, and you'll see they did I made the front page of the paper, put it that way. And there's a video, but we were able to get it cleaned off, and we also have it designated. We got our designation for a Texas Historical Cemetery, and we just got approved for a highway marker, and that is going to denote the community, the Terryville community. We couldn't do it for the cemetery because it had to be on the cemetery. So we said the best thing to do is we made it for the whole community, the Terryville community. And we're waiting we're having a family reunion in Gonzales on around the 15th of June. And we hoping, and Glenda's been helping me with this, hoping that we can have the dedication during our reunion. But I haven't heard back from the powers that be of when it's gonna, when that's gonna happen. I'm also working with Mr. Frank Jackson. He's my fraternity brother from Prairie View.
Yes.
Frank is the president of the Cemetery Association in North Gonzales. And what we've been trying to do, we've been putting together, we're trying to write a book. I've done the research. I have all of the census data from 1870 and 1880. And we're putting it into, we're actually saying like, I put like my great grandfather, Ned Nobles, and then I talk about Ned and his family and all that and what they were doing. I also, with Glenda's help, I've gotten deeds to a lot of the people who own property. Terryville was named after Malam Terry. Malam Terry was a Milano, and he was the only free Black man in Gonzales County in 1860. And that's how Terryville was named after Malam Terry.
Interesting. So I'm really excited to hear how the work is expanding and continuing and how the leadership is growing in Gonzales. This is wonderful to hear. I see that I believe Tim's hand is up. Tim, you have a question or comment?
Yes, I was just wondering, are there any mutual aid societies that grew up in Gonzales, or like fraternities, for example, Black Freemasons, those kinds of groups? Do you have any? Did that come up in any of your research?
Any of you are welcome to answer if there were any.
The YMCA,
community,
like
yeah,
a place that really served the needs of this transitional space, right? Like,
I believe there was, I can't think of the name of the lodge in the Edwards community that they held a school. Do you remember, David? Yeah, it's right on the tip of my tongue.
Right. But I mean, to my knowledge, if there were, it was some time ago, but there certainly aren't any now.
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. KMP.
Knights Pythias.
Oh, the Pythias.
Yes.
Yeah, that was yes, the Pythias, the Knights of Pythias. They had their large center in Dallas.
And they had classes. They held classes there. From the best I can tell, the properties that were established in the Edwards community were given by businessmen and women, especially progressives. We would call them at that time period. They were all, the women were part of the voting rights for women. They were very active in those areas. And so there are 3 or 4 names, and the neighborhoods are named on the land plats of them. But I'm not real. I've not found anything. We have a couple of histories of Gonzales school districts, the schools in the African American school. One is doctorate or master's thesis, in addition to the one that was written locally. that goes in depth into the African-American education system in Gonzales County. But no, I don't have any idea.
My grandfather was a member of the Freemasons, and there were halls in Welder and Gonzales, and they were there through the ending of segregation. That's about the extent of what I know, because my grandfather was a member of Freemasonry. So,
And Elyze, the Gonzales Freemasons were very early in Gonzales. That was one of the first Masonic lodges, and
now I assume he was a part of the print. Mama, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Prince Hall separated into African American and
Yes.
Caucasian, yes. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
I would assume that he's a part of the Prince Hall Masonry.
We're well over kind of our time for this half of the program, but I want to go ahead and allow one more question. And then we're going to take a 2-minute break and go into the next part of our conversation about Texas Freedom Colonies Project and what's next and those sort of things. So Laretha?
Hi. I was just thinking that earlier in your presentation, I thought I saw a slide that had Knights of Peter Claver on it. And Knights of Peter Claver, that's a Catholic fraternal organization, isn't it? I know it is. I'm just saying, I know it is because I'm from Beaumont, so I know a lot about Catholicism, Black Catholic organizations. And so I'm just asking if that could be a thread to pull and see if you can find out more about that particular.
Yes, ma'am. Well, in our history of the Edwards High School, going back before the old school was even built, there's some record that there had been a fire in the school, in the house that they were teaching, where they were teaching the students. And then it goes on to say at that time that the educators moved across the street to the Knights of Peter Claver Hall.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense to me, because I know that Knights of Peter Claver normally have halls where,
Yes,
where they have events. So that could answer Mr. Nelson's question, or give him something to do information on. And I know Knights of Peter Claver are still pretty active, so you can probably contact some of their, I guess a registrar or whatever whoever it is that keeps the records, and they may have records about what was going on in Gonzales.
That's
a thought.
it's a great clue.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Awesome. So here's what I'd like to do. As we come to a close, I want to give our guests the last word. If there's anything else they want to sum up around, where do you think you are and where you're going next? If you could tell us that in 2 minutes, what would the answer be in terms of the work that you're doing together?
Excuse me. So right now we're working on erecting a monument, in addition to the interpretive panels down on the Independence Square that further depict the accomplishments of African Americans in Gonzales. We're also working on having one of the streets renamed in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Something for perpetual representation of African Americans here in Gonzales. So those are the two things that we're working on right now.
Glenda?
I am moving forward with the idea of the district, the neighborhood district, and getting the definition of the boundaries to that. I have a lot more information to go with, and we'll be consulting with National Register representative in Austin to see what his thoughts are on that. So that's kind of a big deal, the neighborhoods and seeing how we can recognize that whole neighborhood.
And so when you say neighborhood, are you speaking of a Freedom Colony community, or what is the anchor of this district, or what's the character of it that makes it significant?
The churches, the cemetery, and the school,
Mhm.
and now other organizations that were there, other buildings that were there. So the sites, what was there, going back.
Awesome.
All I have are maps now.
Those are good things to have. Sometimes we don't even have maps. So don't say only.
The other thing that I'm really interested in is providing information to those in Gonzales County who might be looking for their home place, so that where their Freedom Colony would be. And there are so many very tiny communities that were tied to plantations or to cotton, where they wouldn't call them much plantation, but going back and seeing where clusters of African Americans lived. And we go back again to the school district, the county school districts, to find names and locations for those.
Absolutely.
So
Awesome.
I think we have that to offer those who are looking for their heritage, finding their roots. It's a very difficult journey for the African American population to go back beyond emancipation.
Mhm. Well, this has been wonderful. And I look forward to continuing to be a part of the work in any way I can in Gonzales County. I'm thankful for the time that you've been able to share with us. And rather than go into intermission, before we go into the next part of the program, I want to give just 2 to 3 minutes, if you could, because we're about 10 to 15 minutes late in our program. But I do want to make sure that Elyze is able to tell us at least just 2 minutes or so about Mount Eaton Freedom Community, Freedom Colony, because it is significant and important. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Elyze to share her screen and share her story. And in 2 minutes, we'll transition to the other part of our program. Elyze?
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Oh no, I closed it. Hold on. Stop share. Okay. Here we go. So I believe I left off where I was just kind of telling you all that those were, all right, got it. Those were my ancestors, in which I spoke of before. And so I did make, can everyone see the PowerPoint? It's just 5 slides. I just wanted you to see pictures. So this is the Mount Eaton Church. And so as Ms. Glenda Gordon kind of noted, we're focusing on within the community. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We do try to focus on the church, the community, the church, the cemetery, and the school. And so just very quickly, these are the individuals that I was talking about before: Lee Pettit, the husband, Betty Pettit, his wife, and then Con Stockton, the grandson. Just an aside, the young boy there is my mother's grandfather. So we talk about history, but there are still people alive who are able to get these stories and this information from people who lived it or had parents who actually lived through it, so we can have that information. This is Pastor Boyd James. He's the first recorded pastor of the Mount Eaton Church. And so that was very significant for us to have this picture. And just a little bit about the Mount Eaton Church. In 1889, the community filed for the Mount Eaton Baptist Church deed. So we do have records that go back and allow us to kind of trace what these newly freed slaves did and how they did it. This is a picture of Mount Eaton Church in 2023. So the earliest school records from 1876 lists 63 Black students registered between the two schools in the community. So there was a Mount Eaton school, and then there was another school in the surrounding area named Wesley Chapel. And I think I kind of already spoke about how Mount Eaton School moved to Welder, and it was called Welder Colored School. And in 1950, the Welder Colored School became Ralph Bunche School. And so we are working to get that research together and create that narrative so we can get that recognized and have a historical marker for that as well. This was an interesting picture. I think this is my last picture. Yeah, this is just an interesting picture that I included because this is a 1920s Stockton. Once again, these are my ancestors. We did a lot of digging for pictures and different concrete history that we could include in our application to the Texas Historical Commission. This is the 1920s Stockton funeral in Mount Eaton Cemetery. And the cemetery is still there. The first person who was buried in the cemetery, his name is Ben Green. Yes, and he advocated wholeheartedly to have a cemetery for the Mount Eaton community. And in 1889, he was buried there. Ironically, he was the first person to be buried there. And you can still see his headstone there. And there are family tiers throughout the cemetery. And so I kind of know what section I'm going to be buried in, when, you know. So it's amazing that Mount Eaton has so much record keeping that we're able to submit as we do kind of research and submit narratives for these historical marker designations. So that's my quick kind of informative glance at Mount Eaton community and what we're working to preserve.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Elyze. And I'm looking forward to continue to learn about what you and you're doing and what's going on with Terryville. So it looks like there's real growth. And that really is the theme of what I'm going to share with you this evening, that going forward, the work of Texas Freedom Colleges is not so much about me going out and sprinkling pixie dust, but about people like Elyze and the gentleman, I forgot his name already, pardon me, who was talking about Mr. Kirkwood, talking about Terryville. Going out and doing the work on the ground is what's going to keep this movement going. So that was a really, really great presentation. Thank you to all of our guests. And I'm going to go into the second part of the presentation that gives you a little bit of an update. But rather than go through all the slides, I want to make sure there's time for us to just talk, and then I can answer any questions that you have about the transition and what I'm doing now. So I'm going to share screen again. So much for our schedule. Let's see. Oops. This is the transition. All right. So can everybody see the screen? Anyone can say yes.
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 Okay, thank you. All right, so I really like that Mr. Tucy had mentioned all of the things that have been going on the past few years that have sort of informed, I think, an urgency around preservation. We know about all these things that are going on, but they really spell that public life and public spaces are significant to the fight for social justice. They're to the quality of life in our communities, to life itself, especially when we think about George Floyd. And if we don't feel safe and affirmed in public spaces and in our public history, there are dire consequences. And a lot of that has colored the way that I've decided to approach my work. And for example, wanting more representation, creating more opportunities for African Americans to be front and center in historic preservation practice and public history. All of what you see on the screens are just information about the lack of representation among professional preservationists, and then the barriers to trying to participate. People work. There's a lack of compensation and validation often of what African Americans bring to the table. And then there are ways in which organizing becomes difficult because African Americans are often non-residents of the areas where they have their roots. So we have a lot of these challenges. And so part of my transition is about amplifying that aspect or that inspiration for the work that I've been doing with Texas Freedom Colonies Project and expanding it a bit. So as most of you know, I'm no longer based at Texas A&M. The project is no longer at Texas A&M. And I'm now at the University of Virginia, where I'm both a co-director of the Center for Cultural Landscapes and affiliated with the Equity Center, both at University of Virginia. The shift has been toward really focusing in on reparative planning and preservation research. That is, what's the relationship? How do we get in right relationship? That is not just to say we've done wrong or now we do good, but how are we going to do better in our approaches to doing work together across race or within our communities? I'm interested in the politics of descendant engagement and in continuing to do place-based learning and teaching in freedom colonies. So the vision is that much stays the same, it just expands. Over the past year, the Texas Freedom Colonies Project Atlas has still been active. It's still been available for you to share your stories, but we've gone down to a skeleton crew because I wanted to take this year to take a pivot and to reorganize, to move states, to move the agenda, to move the work. So we're going to continue to do what I call crowdsourcing, that is getting sources from the crowd. We're going to continue to provide free materials, educational materials. The map is free and open to everyone, and do a limited number of invited talks. And most of the hosting we'll do of events will be either in Virginia or we'll support people who are doing the work on the ground and be a part of their events. We'll continue documenting Black settlements, but we'll really focus a lot more on needs and efforts to regenerate along with the origin stories. And that focus on origin stories is also what's going to expand. How do we look at the foundation and origin stories of freedom colonies, as well as challenge and examine the foundational origin stories of nations, of states, of cities? And that research and all of these things are already starting to take place in Virginia, and there's even a project in Canada. So we're expanding our territory. One of the ways we expanded the territory is I co-led a project this summer, the Institute for Higher Education Faculty. It's a workshop, and essentially what we did is I reviewed applications and got funding from the National Endowment for Humanities to bring everyone who was approved to Washington, D.C. to work on how we can, as faculty from across the country, change the way that we teach history about land and about places and center in that history instead of prioritizing the settler history, right? We prioritize and identify ways to teach Black and Indigenous or Native American histories of place and land. So we did that for 3 weeks, and the result is that now we have free learning modules, syllabi. So if you're a faculty member at a university and you want access to these sample modules that you can stick into your teaching, everyone who was involved created those and made them, and those are now publicly available. If you go to the website of peopleslandscapehistory.org, all of those sample modules are available. We've also expanded our network of people that we collaborate and work with. We've been invited to join and have been approved by the superintendent of the park to join the Reconstruction Era National Historic Network. Many people are not aware that there's a Reconstruction Era National Historic Park, and it's multiple sites in Beaufort, South Carolina, but their network is every site or community or park associated with the Reconstruction era. And so in Texas, there are 2 entities on that list. Right now, there are only 2, and one of them is Texas Freedom Colonies Project. So we're the first non-physical entity, and all the settlements on the Atlas that have a historical relationship to the Reconstruction era will become members of the network automatically. So the way the next steps for that is that we're working with a park intern, and we have our own volunteer intern, Isabella, who's working on translating the current park regulations and changing that into a checklist that we can use to gauge which of the settlements on the map fall within the Reconstruction Era National Historic Network and qualify to be a part of the network. So this is exciting. It's a new category of what we call contributing status, which used to be about being in place and being contiguous. And so this is new. It's never been done before, but we think it's going to be a new way that we can give important visibility to all of the settlements that qualify to be part of the network. And the project. So we all know what Freedom Colonies are. This is a quick review, but this is what Freedom Colonies are. This is an early sort of inspiration for the work. Way back in 2011, 2012, I was working at UT Austin on a project called the Austin Historical Wiki. I also served on the Austin Historical Landmark Commission. And in the midst of all of that, people were really expressing that they were interested in not just identifying this building is important because of the architecture, but this building, this place, and sometimes this vacant lot is important because we need to tell the stories about the lost places and not just talk about the architectural elements, though those also tell a story. So I wanted to create a space for that. And without being exposed to Shankleville community, I would never have been able to make those connections around how intangible heritage actually motivated and shaped that community's ability to foster attachment to place and then encourage participation and actually have real outcomes and solve real problems, whether it be putting their homestead, one of their homesteads on the National Register of Historic Places, or stewarding their cemetery, or raising money for scholarships. And so I examined whether or not that was the case in several other settlements around the East Texas area. And that approach to mapping settlements, that approach that first led me to believe, if you look in the back of the book, Texas Freedom Colonies, that there's only 14 settlements in the 2-county area, that there are actually 35 when you spend time in the community and examine records in a different way. And so what really became my focus after conferring with people and doing that research was, how do we centralize a location in one place? So to bring us up to date, I really focused in on what I heard from settlement descendants and tried to put that into the work that I began doing as a scholar. And that's the Texas Freedom Colonies Project. So since 2014, the Texas Freedom Colonies Project has been in existence. And the project is really 3 activities or 4 activities. It's the way that we connect with descendants, we collect materials and stories and data so that we can counter map. What do we mean by counter map? We have a map that is visible to us when we look at the official record. And then there are the places and the stories that are invisible unless we're able to surface them and bring them to the forefront. And they're not all in our public record or even in the back of the book, Texas Freedom Colonies, for that matter. And we co-create research. So how do we do all that? We started by locating and recording 357 locations. That is, we went through the back of the book, Freedom Colonies. We used some of the data that I had collected while engaged in my doctoral research and found several settlements that either didn't have locations, we were not able to find in the public record using our list of 5 major sources, but we were able to identify the locations and origin stories or history of 357 places. So we thought, how do we fill the gap between 357 and 557? Well, we need to crowdsource those gaps from the public. And that is where the online surveys and the workshops came in. And the shift we're doing now is to continue what we've been doing for the last 3 years, 3 to 4 years, is figuring out ways that we can do more train the trainer. How do we support local people already interested in preservation work and already interested in heritage conservation and give them tools and information that can help them do their work while they also share the stories of their settlements with us. The other thing that we've been doing is the place-based learning. So I mentioned that before. We did that and developed the Saving Texas Freedom Colonies booklet that's free to you and available online. We have done programs in the community. In Brenham, we help support them curating their exhibit on Freedom Colony history in Washington County. That was an in-person workshop that we did in September of, I believe, 2021. And in October of 2021, we did our event in the Capital region at the Bullock State Museum of Texas. We held an event with 75 attendees with a number of community partners, including people from Pilot Knob, Alexander Farm, Collins Family, Travis County Historical Commission, Austin History Center, all there to share ways that people can access records, aggregate records, and also learn to conduct oral history interviews. So that event for us was really important, not because we were just able to do what we could do that day, but it was a foundation for hoping people continue to do that work past the time that we're present. And when I say we, I want to pause and show you we. This is a set of individuals over time who've been essential to the project, who do a lot of the actual work. That would be students. So what you're seeing here is a long list of students all the way back to UT Austin 2012 to 2014. I had students that were working with me on something called the 5th Street Project. In A&M, we had all of these students from all these different disciplines who worked on the project. And for a short time, we had a staff member support us named Natalie. And then in UVA, we now have Samantha Veth supporting our work. So concurrent with trying to do the Atlas is only a small part of what the project is. The project is growing and mentoring students to do planning and preservation work differently and to see the world differently. These are just a few pictures. I wanted to just stop and rather than just say, this is what we're going to do, I want to really make sure you see the we. And these are just some great memories of what we've been able to do over time with people who've been involved with the project over time. So I'm really thankful to all of you, everyone here. And especially those who see yourselves here. You should be very proud for what you've been able to do for this movement and the role that you played, and especially excited about the new folks from Virginia who are also becoming a part of this movement. And all of this, I don't expect anyone to read this. What I'm simply showing you is that when we say co-create research, co-creating research means we've created the map and the atlas, but we've also created all of this published research. So while I'm working on a book, all these years, we've also been producing research about our work and about Freedom Colony histories, most of which are academic, but that's what's required to get this thing called tenure. So that's what we've been doing. We've been publishing, we've been talking about the work and publishing the work. We've verified 467. So we have 1,110 entries in the Atlas. Out of those, about 750 of them are really unique entries about places. Out of those, we've been able to locate, verify 467 communities in Texas. We've also been able to make more threats visible to these places with our TxDOT projects layer. We've supported or been consulting parties, meaning if there's a TxDOT project, we speak out. We've just published, along with the Environmental Defense Fund, we've supported case studies, research about how water quality and access to clean water, how that's a big issue for not just Texas Freedom Colonies, but also colonias. So that's a report that we're hoping to get more widely disseminated in the near future. And we've also, our work has inspired or informed the work of people creating rural Freedom Colony districts and starting Freedom Colony mapping projects here in Virginia. So what's next? It's all about scaling up. So part of scaling up is stopping everything and revisiting what our true goals are and where I want to be going next. And there's going to be a we, or there's not going to be a Texas Freedom Colonies project. So just to be clear, one of the most rewarding part of this, and Glenda said this earlier, is relationship, but it's also the most challenging part of this work. So it was important for me to bring my full self to the work enthusiastically with the right energy and the right mindset. So I really stepped back so that I could revisit the work after having sought more funding, after figuring out ways that I can use the Center for Cultural Landscapes to support the Freedom Colony work, not only here, but around the country. And that's why I'm at UVA, so that the work is about Texas, but also about what Texas can teach the world. And this is the platform and the place that wanted that to happen. And that's why I'm here. So we'll continue to collect the stories and do train the trainer and push this place preservation model, which is about collaboration and supporting descendant-led work. And then again, seek the funding so we can hire the on-the-ground coordinators. I will not be traveling to 254 counties to do the work that needs to be done through every county in Texas. But I will be devising ways and seeking funding to devise ways for us to do the work from the bottom up, to continue to do the work and get the support we need to do it. So staying engaged, what does that mean? Before I go into that, I want to pause and see if there are questions, because I've been talking at the screen and I want to just take a moment to see if there are any questions before we go into the staying engaged piece. You could raise your hand, or Hannah, could you let me know if there are any questions in Q&A or the chat?
Looks like no questions in Q&A.
Okay, and no comments or, okay. I just want to make sure I'm not just talking at the screen. Okay, and so let me return to the presentation. All right. So everyone is familiar here, or most of you should be familiar with the Texas Freedom Colonies Project Atlas, the online map. And so what this is composed of is not just an actual map, but each point is the result of your contributions to the map. So it includes any kind of historical information you've added, any pictures, any stories, memories. And if you take the Black Settlement Study Survey, which I highly encourage our descendants to do, we want to hear from you what's going on in your settlement now around your goals, your challenges, your best practices. These surveys, when we say we're gathering stories and oral histories, this is the tool that helps you to do that. And it's also the same surveys that I've been using since conducting research all the way back to 2014. So you might be interested to know, how do we determine that a settlement has moved from not located or needs more research to located? Located, that's all the blue points that you see on the map. When you open the map and you see all these different color points, the blue points are those that we have located and verified. And here's the questions we ask, and this should give you a perspective on the type of information that helps us do what we do. We asked, did it exist apart from another municipality or at least have a different name? What's the name, what's the county, and what's the extant feature, which simply means what's the natural feature, what's the building, what's the cemetery, or any kind of feature in the landscape that may be the same name as the name of the settlement, or that was a major Black institution that gives us a hint that large numbers of Black people might have lived in that area. And it was founded, or that institution was founded between 1865 and 1930. Because what we're really trying to find here and tell the story of is the place. But sometimes the only way to tell the story of the place is to understand the clusters of landowners, the church history, the school history, the lodge history, the cemetery history. And we're also looking at, was there ever a majority African-American population for at least 10 years or more in this area at any given time? And so we look at all of those factors and information that people share that gives us those answers. That helps us move it to located, okay? And so where we are now with the project, and this is the training piece, is really about understanding the difference between public and community history. While we've located and verified the existence of places, it's a little different than getting descendant community stories. So there's the history that you can get from the Texas Historical Commission, that you can get from Texas Historical Markers, that you maybe can get from US National Register, that you can get from the US Geological Service, or from the census. We've already done all those. We started with those. So if you go to those places, or the Texas State the Handbook of Texas Online, if you go to those places and copy and paste that information from those sources into the Atlas, know that that's where we started in 2017. We already did that. So what we're looking for is not that, because that's where we started. What we're looking for is what comes out of your bottom drawer, in your, underneath your bed, your baggies where you have these funeral programs, what's word of mouth. That is where we are with the project. To really advance it to the next level is to get as many of those stories in the voice of African Americans as possible. And that's why I wanted to have us look at or examine a project where the local folks are really working out how to listen to each other and sort of share in this responsibility to tell the full story, which takes a lot of listening, right? And this is just an example of a community history, trying to get across public history versus community history. This community history gives us a lot of facts, but it's also memory. It's also someone's personal connection to place. So where are we? We've ID'd 80% of our original list of locations. So we've gotten pretty far. And we've actually got 472 as of today that we've identified, meaning we answered those 3 questions. But we have much fewer for which we have these genuine stories or memories of place from descendant communities. And that's the shift. That's where we want to go, because there's great funders who are interested in how we do this, not only in Texas, but around the world. And so starting with our project, we have a chance to do something really excited if we can make the shift to community history. So I'll say moving forward, we've made a few changes. We have a new volunteer program structure, which is similar to what we have, or we had Adopt a County where we had captains and just regular volunteers. We now call them public researchers versus participant researchers. The difference is we are going to invest in our researchers, meaning if you're a participant researcher who's a community-based leader who is representing or leading an initiative or doing train the trainer or organizing events, we have some access to funds to reimburse for travel and expenses. And there's a different specific application available upon request. And this has to be negotiated. You can't go out and do work and say, hey, reimburse me for my work. We have to discuss in advance what it is that you want to do and how it ties into our research goals. And then we can help with some minimal support. This is something we did on an ad hoc basis, but at this university, this is part of the way they do business and it's institutionalized. And so I wanted to express this opportunity. Does it mean we'll pay $1,500 for you to come here? No, we don't have that kind of money. But does it mean we can help possibly with gas or overnight visit in a hotel maybe? Possibly. We can give gift cards for small amounts. So this is something that's a different application to be this type of researcher. We have resources we want you to continue to use. And the definition of resources are places you can look to identify the answers to those 3 questions. What are the online free sources that could help you? And incidentally, these may help you with other research projects you have. And here are the surveys, as well as reading list, as well as a small booklet that helps you identify freedom colonies in the field. And we have a page all about African-American land retention, a page all about, it's a community legal kit created by the University of Texas at Austin that talks about things like getting a historical marker, how to get a designation. It gives you links. It's all in one place on how to access information to help you meet some of those preservation goals that we simply are not equipped to do. We are not an agency. We're not a nonprofit. We're my research initiative, right? That I've been fostering and growing over time. So we don't have an agency capacity, but we have a website that can hopefully steer you in the right direction. And we of course have guidance on how to add to the Atlas, how to share information if you go to our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel has directions, stories, my lectures, all types of information and guidance, and even coverage of a few of our workshops. Here again is the page, if you actually go to the website, the kind of resources that you'll see. And here's what I want to leave with before we have our discussion around the future of the work and hopefully give space for some announcements for people who are doing work who visited with us tonight. This is what I ask. Before engaging in Freedom Colony, heritage conservation, research, or preservation, I want you to ask yourself some questions, because these are the kind of questions that I think that Glenda and other folks have tried to engage. And this is what I'd hope is that if there is a Black-led effort already engaged in the work, ask yourself, is there already a Black-led effort that's trying to preserve a church, that's trying to preserve a school, that's trying to protect a particular property from falling down? What can you do about that rather than starting a new effort? If they do want you to be involved, is that involvement welcome? And what is the role, the optimal role for you to play? How is this a reciprocal exchange? Oh, we'd like to do a scanning event. Do they want you to do a scanning event? Do they have something else that is their priority that they'd like you to get involved in? Ask those questions. How do you add value to the existing work? Ask yourself, how have I centered African-American concerns and priorities while collaborating on work that takes place in their communities? And how have I made efforts to build trust in the process? There's not a check mark. There is, cultural competence, but I talk about cultural humility, which is about sort of displacing yourself as the center of what's normal and correct, right? Why won't they do what I ask? Rather than what is wrong with what I'm doing that it doesn't attract the people that deserve to have access to the resources and the platform? Ask those questions going forward, whether you're working in partnership with me or anyone. I want to talk about future events, and I'm going to give the floor. But before I do that, I'm going to go through some things that are coming up. April and May, I'm working on my book. We're doing a little bit of a pause. July through September, we're planning or thinking about how we may do train the trainer in public speaking in the future, and planning an event in UVA, where I'm going to invite a number of settlements from the West, that's west of the Mississippi, to come over to UVA and exchange knowledge with descendant efforts here. There's amazing work being done on UVA's campus, at Montpelier, and other places where descendants are working on getting equal share in power and control over telling the story of the public history of these places. April through June, I'm focused on funding applications. May 12th is the deadline for a spring newsletter. So if you want to tell us about your Juneteenth activities or things that you've been doing in the spring, get it to us by May 12th at our email address. May 15th, we hope to have our newsletter released. June 8th is the AYA Symposium. I'm about to hand it over to the creator of the symposium in a moment to share about that. In July, we may have a panel or training somewhere in Texas. This is a maybe. We're going to pause in July and August again, and then August, summer, our newsletter should be released. And then in the fall, we'll have an event calendar come out. And by September, we hope to have that programming I hinted at. And December through August of next year, we're hiring and training a new team. So that's where we are. Here are the myriad ways to contact us and remain in communication with us. Again, us right now is myself and one student and a few volunteers. We're not an agency. We're not able to fix legal issues. We don't have funding to come and, let's say, clean your cemetery or bring it up to code. But what we do have are resources that can hopefully steer you in the right direction and try to make those available to you as we go through this transition phase. And then we can look at what other support we may be able to give people in the future. So with that, I want to hand it over to one of our guests to talk about the AYA Symposium, a really, really important event that helps continue this conversation about freedom colonies and telling the freedom colony story. So with that, I'd like to invite, and I hope she's still here, Ms. Laretha Clay to talk a little about the AYA Symposium, please.
Yes, I am still here. And the AYA Symposium originally started as a symposium associated with the Texas Purple Hull Pea Festival, which I'm not sure how many of you ever heard of it. And actually, our very first symposium, Andrea was involved, and it was focused on freedom colony. Well, one of the first ones, Andrea was involved, and it was focused on freedom colonies, and we invited a lot of freedom colonies from the Deep East Texas area, because this effort is organized originally by the Shankleville Historical Society. And Shankleville is a freedom colony in Newton County, which is way on the east side of Texas, basically in Louisiana, next to Jasper County. And we started doing symposia during the Purple Hull Pea Festival. And then in order to broaden not only the reach and the audience, because honestly, going to Shankleville in June, which is when Purple Hull peas are ready in June, can be a pretty daunting and hot and uncomfortable task. So we decided, well, let's move it to a university setting in order to, number one, try to expand the number of people who participate and not ask people to come all the way to Shankleville in June. So we had one in Prairie View, and then we had the COVID. So then we had the second one in we had one in Prairie View, then we had COVID, then we had one that was virtual. And last year we had it in Dallas, and we returned to Dallas this year. And so we just want to invite everyone. The theme this year is using technology to tell your freedom colony story. And we're looking at technology as being not only the whiz bang AR, VR, high tech chat GPT things. We're looking at technology as being things as simple as, especially when you're from an area like the coast of Texas, how do I maintain and keep my valuables, be it, pictures, Bibles, papers, buildings, when there's so many hurricanes and other things that are happening. So we're going to be talking about not only, how do you use a computer to do things, but how do you even save things, or plan your saving of things, or try to restore them once they have been hit by a flood. And Andrea will be doing a panel with us. We'll be talking with other organizations in Texas, not only North Texas, but also East Texas, about the work that they've been doing and how they are working with different government bodies to maintain their freedom colonies. And so the whole point of the symposium is to just continually talk about different ways that we can preserve freedom colonies. And the website for the symposium is ayasymposium.org, and I think I can put it in the chat.
We have it in the chat, but also
okay.
the direct registration link, if you don't mind putting that in the chat too, it couldn't hurt.
Okay.
Or maybe it could. It sounded like
Well,
it hurt.
so no, it won't hurt. It's just that I have a hard time remembering it. So it's better to just go on Aya Symposium and click on it, and it'll take you right to the registration page. So
Awesome. Awesome. And I will tell you, it's a good opportunity. We're all pressed for time, but really what I hear from people who show up at the Aya Symposia is what they get out of it is simply being able to connect with other people who are interested and value freedom colonies and want to talk about freedom colonies and have other people listen. And just to have this be a day that's dedicated and be around people who really understand why these places matter. So any and everybody who cares about freedom colonies should be there. And again, it's going to be University of North Texas at Dallas.
right, University of North Texas. And I forgot to mention that another thing that we also feature in the Aya Symposium and have from the very beginning is, if you are a Texas educator, you do get CTE credits. Is it CTE? You get credits, for continuing education. So if you're a Texas educator, so our mantra is for Texas history enthusiasts and educators.
Yes, indeed. So this has been wonderful. I know it's been a little late, yes, but I want to leave another 5 minutes or so for those who have questions for me that I can answer, or any comments about this evening. Please feel free to share at this time. I'm not seeing any hands up.
If I may.
Yes,
James
Mr. Kirkland.
Like I said, Frank Jackson and I are trying to write a book about the communities and settlements in Gonzales County. And if anybody would like to help us in that endeavor, we would appreciate it. I can provide. I have about 80 pages of information going back from the history of slavery in Gonzales County and all of that. And actually, like I said, I have the census, the Black census from Gonzales County from 1870 and 1880. And we're writing a paragraph on each family that's in the census. So we need some help with that.
That sounds really like an important project for the county.
Yes.
Glenda and I have talked about this, and
A long time ago, yeah.
and she wants us to do it. It's a slow process because you have to take the information that's in the database and then write a paragraph about it. And we have half of the 1870 census written, and I'm about 1/3 the way in the 1880 census. And so I can share that document that I had, that Word document, with anybody who wants it, wants to help us with this project.
Am I on?
Yes.
Hello?
Glenda. Mhm.
I would love to get involved in that and see how we can share resources with him to get that work done. That would be awesome.
Great.
Glenda already, Glenda's office provided me with copies of deeds that when black families bought property. Like there's a deed that's Milam Terry and Elbert Smith. Elbert Smith is my great-great-great-grandfather. They bought property together, and I have that deed. It's in the document that I'm rewriting. So she's been most helpful in that. Only thing I'm hoping to try to get is a picture of the school that they had out there.
Did you not get the one I sent?
That's the one you sent me?
Yes, yesterday.
Oh, great. Thank you. I thought that's what it was, but okay, great. I will include that.
I may find an older one. Yeah.
Okay, I will put that in the book, in when we talk about the school. I will. Thank you.
How can people reach you, Mr. Kirkwood?
My email address is jameskirkwood2644@gmail.com.
Would you like for me to have available your application for the historical commission that you completed?
Do what now?
Would you like for me to share the application?
Oh, yeah. Oh, one other thing, excuse me. Our next project, like I said, we only know 117 names that are buried in the cemetery. Our next project, since we just finished the historical marker, our next project is to put a monument in the cemetery with those 117 names, plus the other 1,100 unknown. And that's the project that we got going on now. In fact, we just started, but that's where we are right now. That's our big project after the historical mark.
Mr. Kirkwood, this is Elyze Davis. I know you just gave your email. I would love to reach out to you. We would love to participate in your book project. That sounds very important for the Gonzales community, and Mount Eaton would love to participate in that.
I will send you, if you send me, you email me, and I will send you
I
a
will
copy of
share
that.
your information with each other.
Okay, and I will send anybody. I'll send anybody who wants a copy of where we are, the draft information that we have now. Like I said, it's about 80-some pages of information that we have already.
It's awesome. It is.
And
awesome.
Glenda, if there's some tech support that we can offer you, we do have a free intranet space, or I could help you, set up if you want to do some file sharing.